All right, I've already mentioned the onslaught of new things happening on the EU level. Some people call it a tsunami of regulations. I don't know what our next speaker calls it. I'm going to let him do that himself. I'm proud to present Staffan Olsson, Head of Public Affairs at GS1 Sweden.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll have to move this so I can every once in a while look at the screen so I know where I am in my deck. So good morning, everyone. I'm Staffan Olsson from GS1 Sweden. I'm here today to talk about, give a little background on who we are, because in most cases there are a few still in the audience that may not be aware of who we are. I'll make a brief overview of the upcoming legislation that we talked about, and then dive into the needs for data to comply with this legislation. And also maybe some tips and tricks on how to get started. So initially, let's see if this wants to. No? There we go. So, how new EU legislation will affect the fashion industry and actually any other industry that sells physical objects. So this applies to pretty much everyone, but including textile. And textile is of high priority to the regulators. So that's why we tend to talk a lot about textile in this context. But just a short background on who we are first. Now there's someone in between. So a little bit about GS1. So we're a global organization. We're a standards body. So we make standards. We're not an IT company. We don't sell solutions like that. So we're pretty much present everywhere. So we have offices in 118 countries. We've been around for 50 years. One of our standards, I'll show them on the next slide, is barcodes, the ones that you see on cornflakes packs and on anything. And someone made a calculation that these barcodes are scanned about 10 billion times per day, which is a couple of billion more times than people make searches on Google. I think the number is too low. I think it's much more if you add up all the shopping in the world in one day. So we're not for profit. We are user-driven, meaning that everything we have in our standards is derived from user needs. Users coming to us and telling us, we need this edition, we need this standard to work like that. And we're open, so anyone can participate. Any company can participate in our standards work, and any company can use our standards. So there's no limitations for that. And here is an overview of our standards portfolio. Maybe I'll just ask you to click whenever. So this is pretty much what we do. I'm not going to go through this. We have trainings for those who want to learn this in detail. But our standards portfolio is in 3 categories. One is identifications, where you pretty much can identify any business object, a product, a location, a factory, a shipment. If you're born in the UK, you're assigned a number, a GS1 number, to identify you towards your, with the NHS, the health service. And if you look on your power meter at home, you have a GS1 number identifying your power meter. So the GS1 standards could be used for many things. And in the middle, we have our data carrier standards. So those are how you encode the identifiers in machine-readable formats, so you can easily capture the number. That's what happens at checkout in stores, or when you scan a QR code that contains a GS1 identifier. And to the left, to the right, my left, your right, is our data sharing standards, which is a portfolio of standards for sharing data about products. So the first one is the master data about products, so you describe all the properties of a product. Then in the middle, you have the transactional data, which is pretty much doing e-commerce business to business, the invisible e-commerce that is much bigger than the one you see on where consumers actually click. So what happens in the previous steps of the supply chain is much bigger, at least in some industries. And at the bottom there, you have the physical event data, where we have standards allowing you to make traceability data, generate traceability in real time. We'll see some examples of that later today. So that's it. So now you've seen this. We're not going to show it anymore today, but now you know that this exists pretty much. So next slide, please. So this is the timeline of EU legislation coming. And this is actually the timeline, it's the political process, not the implementation. there are other slides that do that. And this is not complete. There are things that are not on this slide. But there's quite a few, starting already in 2023 with a battery regulation and the deforestation regulation, which actually kicks in now, last of September this year. So anything that contains rubber or chocolate or wood has to be declared as deforestation free, and you have to prove it through traceability, tracking the wood or the whatever is produced back to the lot where it's produced originally. So the cocoa in this, where was the cocoa produced? In Colombia or Brazil or somewhere. So you have to need to know that, and that kicks in 4 months. And most companies are not really ready for that. So there are others, which I'll dive into more later, is the eco-design for sustainable products regulation, which contains the concept of digital product passports, which is one of the drivers also for the textile industry. And there are a few more. All the ones that I marked in yellow are somewhat connected to traceability. They rely on traceability data for you to actually be able to comply. So you can't really make up the numbers. You have to have data coming from your supply chain upwards, so your supplier side, but also in some cases from your customer side. So if you're doing CSRD reporting, you need to report greenhouse gases also from your customer side. So you need data from both sides to do that. And I'll illustrate that in a few moments. So this is the background. This is the driver. This is why everyone talks about. This is a tsunami that Conor mentioned. Although tsunami is not really a nice word, so it's a wave. We actually thought, well, if you see this wave coming, so we presented in another event. So what's your approach? Are you getting a life vest or a surfboard? So we want to promote the surfboard approach. This is how you can actually use this to improve your operation rather than just trying to survive through it. Next slide, please. So traceability. It all starts with traceability. So traceability needs to generate your data. And usually we illustrate supply chains like this. They have one starting point, one end, and pretty simple and straight line. But it has to be more circular. Now there have been many clicks here. So it starts with the raw materials. Even the raw material has to generate data that goes into the traceability stack. So up there is where we pile up all the traceability data from the supply chain. If you keep moving, so obviously you can use GS1 standards to generate this data. So you can use global trade item numbers to identify the products, global location numbers to identify the factories or the locations, and some of the other standards to actually share the data. And you'll see a pattern here. So the manufacturing generates more data for that goes into the traceability. And you can just keep clicking until we're done. So, and even at the consumer phase, in some cases, for some product categories, in some cases, that's where it ends. You don't need to capture any more data. So if it's a product that you just kind of consume after that, so if it's a detergent, there's no much recycling of a detergent, maybe for the packaging, but not for the actual product. So, but it keeps generating data, and you can use the standards to generate it, and it builds up. So a few more clicks, and we'll fill this thing up, coming from the various ways after disposal. If you recycle, sorry, one too much. The recycling or the remanufacturing or the redistribution or just life extension of the product. And this is not complete. We can add more arrows going everywhere. There are a lot of graphics on this. Most graphics are actually clockwise, but not ours. We have to stand out a little bit, be different. But this is the whole idea that the supply chain, even if it's circular, or maybe especially when it's circular, has to generate data that you need to do to first of all, to do the reporting or to comply with these regulations, but also to improve your supply chains. So if you go to the next one, please. So this is kind of what we mentioned previously, and I think Linda was touching it. So companies have digitalized their supply chains and worked with traceability for a long time in some industries because it improves efficiency, because it's good business. And now there's a new reason to do it, which is compliance with the regulations. But the tools are already there. The standards are already there. The methods are there already. So all you have to do is figure out how to utilize what's already there. So we kind of see this, all the data that you assess through the traceability solutions as raw data that you can use to comply with the regulations and boost your supply chain performance at the same time. So if you click once, we'll see some of the data points may be used for CSRD reporting. So like carbon footprint, you have to have your scope 1, which is your own business, but also the scope 2 and scope 3. And the scope 3 is actually exactly this. So if you collect from the traceability data flow, get the carbon footprint numbers from your suppliers and for your customers, that's where you can actually perform a proper scope 3, which is not based on guessing and average numbers, it's based on data, which means that if you get an improvement somewhere, you find a supplier with new solar panels, your numbers will actually be improved rather than having the average for that country. And if you go to the next one, well, some other regulations may require some other data. So if you were paid attention really, you see that there are other blocks being highlighted there. So different regulations may require different data points, but they may all come from the same data flow of traceability data that you have to collect throughout the supply chain. So, diving into the eco-design for sustainable products regulation. So, in summary, it is first of all, it was approved and published last summer. So the final approval is now there, is no longer a draft. So we know exactly what the text contains. And it's a framework setting rules for how products should be more sustainable, more resource efficient, and some of the properties of this. But this is very generic for things that cover any product category. And then there will be requirements that are specific to product categories that will be released in time. And actually, textile is one of the first product categories that will be there. So the plan is to release the rules late 2025, and they will kick in 18 months later, so early 2027. This will be live. So if you don't comply with them, you're actually, not compliant, I wouldn't say. Will become criminals, which is a strong word, but actually that is the formal name. But also, despite the idea to have product-specific rules or category-specific rules coming later, already in the framework, there's this ban on destruction of unsold goods, specifically targeting fashion, which kicks in 1 year from now. So that is already happening very soon. And as part of this legislation, it's built in also the technical part on how to prove that you're actually sustainable, which is sharing data through digital product passports. And which need all the data from the traceability. You have to populate your product passport with some relevant data. We don't know exactly the data points yet, because that will come early 2025 for textile. But we pretty much know the plumbing, how it will work. So next one, please. So a digital product passport is a digital representation of a product, basically. And this definition comes from an EU-funded project, and it's similar to the definition in the legislation itself, although that is kind of too much legal text, so this one is more understandable. So you have to have data available and offer access to the data through just scanning a QR code. And it should be made available to consumers or to anyone else. And it shouldn't require that you have a specific app or anything. Just a mobile phone with a camera that can scan a QR code should be the starting point. Next, please. This is the Article 9. You have to talk to someone that actually read it, so in order to be in compliance. But in short, you have to have unique persistent identifiers on your products. So there has to be a unique number identifying every product, which makes sense, of course. And they have to be data carriers on the standard, so you can encode these numbers, so they're easy to determine which product is which. There's a specific ISO standard pointed out for the product identifiers, so you can't make up your own numbers. I'll make up my own product identifier. It's probably unique, or at least it's unique in my brand. That's not good enough. It has to be an ISO-compliant identifier. There are 48 ways of doing that, so there are 48 issuing agents that can help supply with these numbers. GS1 is one of them, but there are also 47 others. That can do that. We're the most prominent in consumer goods, but there are others. And also the data should be, you're not supposed to link users to a PDF file. that humans can read is supposed to link to machine-readable data that systems can understand, and then in some cases present it to a consumer. But also, if you're a company that want to access data from about 3,000 products at a time, you don't want to read that. You don't want it to something human readable. You want it to appear like a database. So it has to be machine readable and structured and according to standards. And no vendor lock-in. So you can't buy, have a solution. Oh, I have a DPP solution, and then you implement it, and then you don't like the supplier anymore, so you want to change. And then there are technology, things that make it impossible for you to change. That's illegal. So you have to, the portability rules that are for like social media also apply to this, to DPPs. So the idea is to, through the data carrier, enable anyone that holds a mobile phone in his hand to link to all these types of data that then originates from the various parts of the supply chain. Whether you have assessed them in one place, or if they still reside, at their source, and you have a system that can get it on the fly, that is open. Both are viable. We see projects experimenting with these things in slightly different ways. And I have an example. So Jenny, you're in the room. Perfect. So ideally, if the projector is good enough, you should be able to scan that QR code. These are actually on garments in store right now. Not on all garments in the Kappahl stores, but in a pilot project. So if you succeed in scanning it, it's kind of grayish here, you'll get this type of data. And the data you get is a combination of master data from the PLM system at Kappahl, which describes the model, but also individual data about that specific garment. So they're serialized. So the QR code contains both a product number and a serial number in a QR code that is also contains a link to where you can find the data. So it's all combining various types of GS1 standards to do this. But it's all in line with Article 9 in the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulations. We did this by the book, or actually not. We were part of it. Trust Trace was part of it. Kappahl, obviously, part of it. So it's a good example. So if you want to know more about this, I'll talk to Jenny in the break. Next, please. So these are the prioritized products. These are the product categories that are actually mentioned specifically in the legislation itself. So the Parliament forced the Commission in the negotiation to actually mention these 10 categories. And also that was a surprise for some people that thought that, the Eco-Design Directive is only for consumer products. No, it's not. It's for all products. So steel beams are not usually consumer products. But iron and steel, and textile and footwear are the first two categories, because that's where it's expected to have most effect, most bang for the buck, because they're problematic industries, both of these, from the Commission's point of view. But then there will be a series of others, and these are just the first 10. This will cover everything except food, feed, and medical products. So, and here are some activities that go on in the EU right now on this. So the first one is the formal standardization, where they actually will decide the technical requirements for how this will work. So in order to do that, the legislators have to point to what they call harmonized standards. And harmonized standards in Europe can only be delivered by CEN and CENELEC. So there is an initiative to work there. So Joint Technical Committee 24 does that. And if you want to be part of that, called SIS, SIS in Sweden, Swedish Standards Institute, because they have a mirror committee that you can join. CIRPAS is another EU project. It's a 12 million euro project running over 3 years, where they have 13 pilots that actually implement. They build systems that do this, and half of them are related to textiles. And they're building in different ways. So there's a website you can find there and to learn more and join their fan club to get news, emails and stuff like that. And then finally, the European Commission will set up eco-design forums where they actually will interact with the industries affected by these delegated acts to talk to them, for textile, what should be in this delegated act. So companies or organizations like Euratex, Eurocommerce, and also large companies like large companies will be invited to do this. to be part of the conversation with the Commission. So, what now? So there are many regulations that will require reporting, first at corporate level, like CSRD, but also at product level. But basically, those two categories rely on the same type of data. It's just different assessment levels. So if you report on product level or on corporate level, it's the same traceability data you need. So much of this information will be shared, and there's so much data that it's going to be impossible to do this manually. If you expect that you can do this by emailing Excel spreadsheets to each other, you're going to fail. It will not work. You have to do this properly. So you have to digitalize your value chains to some point, and in order to do that, and focus on traceability, and to do that, you need something we call interoperability. So next slide, please. So interop what? So this is a difficult word. I've practiced. Try saying it. Interoperability, interoperability, interoperability. You catch on after a while. But interoperability, for some people, they think, oh, this is just technical. It's kind of like finding the USB-C, and it's interoperable with my laptop, so I can charge it. Perfect. That's just one level. So at the top there, this was also mentioned by Linda. So the organizational interoperability is how you connect your business with others. How does my sales process talk to your purchasing process? What is the logic in how we work together in our supply chain? Next level is the semantic interoperability. What do we mean by things? When we say delivery date, what do we mean? Is that when it leaves your premises or when I get it? So you have to define things. And then, of course, you have the technical levels. You have to work on all this, all these levels. And how to get started? Well, start internally. You have to digitalize. It's not too early to start digitalizing your business. It's not too early. So if we're not doing it yet, it's time to begin now. Is your organization and the way you work fit for purpose for this? Or do you need to find other ways of changing? Do you have a clear responsibility, ownership of data? Do you work in silos or not? I had that slide as well, but I kind of removed it, but I wouldn't have too many. Using common terminology. Actually, I had the silos still. There we go. What's your digital maturity in your company? There are 4 levels here. Paper-based or, the second worst is emailing Excel spreadsheets to each other and thinking, oh, we're digital. We can also email PDFs every once in a while. That is not digital. So being more digitalized is when you have that integration that Linda mentioned. Your systems are talking to each other, you're talking to each other. And finally, if you're quite good at this, you use the technology for your own business development. We can have a whole day session on this, so I'm not doing that today. So where do you start? Well, start a traceability project. Why not? Find the stakeholders you need to talk to. We actually, from GS1, has a globally based methodology support. So we have it's completely open. You can just, if you memorize this link or take a picture, I could have had a QR code. It's out there. So it's a step-by-step process or process support. This is how you can get started on implementing traceability. And the first phase is just setting up the scope and ambition. So please use that. And that is my handover to the next panel, which is about starting a traceability project in textiles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Staffan. I think by my assessment, there's no one who is as well read on the EU requirements for the textile industry as Staffan Olsson. So I'm super happy to have him here today.